empieza vuestro turno. ¿Tenéis alguna pregunta? A ver, Reme.
Hola, buenas tardes o buenos días, Stuart. Gracias por tu presentación. Yo tengo dos preguntas para él, por lo menos. Una es, desde que se adoptó la política de Open Access en la Facultad de Bellas Artes o Fine Arts o la de Educación, ¿ha habido alguna respuesta por parte de las editoriales de alguna manera? Y la siguiente pregunta es, ¿va a ir algún plan por parte de la facultad de seguimiento de la política entre sus autores o profesores?
So those are both very good questions. So the first question was whether what the reaction from publishers has been, and the second question is what follow-up we're doing. So let me talk about the second question first. One of the recommendations, in addition to this recommendation that our committee made to institute these open access policies, another recommendation was to set up an office for scholarly communication. And this summer, the provost of the university set up that office, and I'm now directing that office. So, and it's that office that is doing the follow-up, and of course a lot of follow-up is needed. Absolutely necessary to get faculty aware of the policy, involved in the policy, and complying with it to the extent that we can. So we've done a lot of outreach. Many of the things that Bram Luyten talked about in his talk, in order to do outreach in support of institutional repository, we've actually been doing, and he's absolutely right that those kinds of things are necessary. Meetings with departments, using all kinds of avenues of communication with faculty members, and so forth. So a lot of follow-up is being done at that level, and also follow-up in the policy level. For instance, policies of the sort that I just mentioned, having to do with supporting open access journals. Then publisher reaction. There's been a range of reaction from publishers we're beginning to see, and the reaction comes because it's necessary to make publication agreements consistent with this new policy, so faculty members attach this addendum to the publication agreements, and publishers have different reactions to that. Some publishers are perfectly agreeable with the addendum. The faculty member sends in a publication agreement with the addendum, and it is apparently accepted. There's no, the faculty member never hears a complaint. Other publishers have instituted their own policies that they won't accept the Harvard addendum, and that's fine too. I have no problem with that. If a publisher thinks that that's their approach, and there's a simple, and then authors can decide what they want to do with respect to those publishers. And authors have various choices. Authors can refrain from publishing with those publishers. This is safe to say is a very rare reaction to that kind of policy. Authors can negotiate an alternative arrangement, or authors can just request a waiver of the Harvard policy, and then if they waive the Harvard policy, then there's no problem signing any kind of publication agreement with any publisher. So, and from my point of view, it doesn't matter to me very much which way faculty go, whether they attach an addendum that's accepted or they request a waiver. As long as they do one of the two, that's fine. Because either way, essentially all of the advantages of the policy still hold. In particular, if a waiver is requested, we still have information about the article. We can pursue placing the article in the repository, and even making the article available open access if the publisher allows it. And many, the majority of journals do allow some kind of open access distribution through an institutional repository, whether or not the addendum is accepted. So we can still get a broad range of open access, even if waivers are requested. So publisher action has been mixed, and I think that's entirely appropriate. That's a perfectly reasonable. It's up to publishers to make their own business decisions about how they want to deal with addenda and policies of this sort. Having said that, we would like to set up the situation so that if the publisher chooses to move in the direction of open access, they're able to do that. And publishers, it's difficult for publishers to do that, even if they're well-intentioned and even if they want to, without some kind of policy of the sort that I talked about at the end of my talk. So that's why that policy is so important, that universities be willing to underwrite open access publication charges for true open access journals.
¿Alguna pregunta más?
Hola, sí, yo quería saber si la adenda está firmada por el director de la oficina, en este caso tú, o por el provost, o quién firma, si es que está firmada.
Who signs the addendum? So the addendum, so the way the addendum process works is we have I can show you the addendum. Hang on 1 second. I don't know if you can see that. That's a little web form that you fill out to generate the addendum, and you just it has entries for the title, the journal name, the author, the publisher, and you click a button at the bottom, and that generates an addendum that you sign at the bottom. So the author signs the addendum and also attaches that addendum to the publication agreement and sends that in. So instead of just sending in the publication agreement, which also has a signature, the addendum also has the author's signature. It's the author that signs because it's the author that is specifying the modification to the publication agreement. There's also, you'll notice, there's a place for the publisher to sign, to agree to the addendum. Publishers almost never do, and they don't bother to send back a copy signed. In any case, the statement in the publication agreement states that if it's published without sending back a copy, implicitly the publisher has signed it, has agreed to it. So the fact that publishers rarely send back a copy signed is not a problem. I don't know. Does that answer the question?
¿Alguna pregunta más?
Hi, Stuart. Yo quería preguntarte, si he entendido bien la política, lo que hacen los autores es dar derechos, a copyright, a la universidad. La universidad, cuando tiene estos derechos, ¿va a ofrecer los artículos en un sistema diferente al de todos los derechos reservados?
I'm not exactly sure what you mean by reserved copyrights.
I mean that if you give all rights reserved, as in the publishing model, when you have the copyright rights from the author, the university, are you going to offer that work in some right reserve?
So let me say exactly what the legal aspect is. So the author starts with the copyright, and the author keeps the copyright. There is no copyright transfer from the author to the university. The only right that's transferred is a limited, non-exclusive license to the university, and it's a non-exclusive. Copyright stays with the author, and the author can grant that copyright to a publisher if the author desires. The university has a non-exclusive license, and with that license it can place the it can distribute the article from our institutional repository, and it can also exercise other aspects of copyright and can transfer this non-exclusive license to others. The non-exclusive license is also limited by a condition that the university, neither the university nor any other a body that gets a transferred right can sell the article for a profit. So it's a non-commercial right only. So, however, the right is transferable, and for instance, if the author gives up copyright to the publisher, the university can then transfer back this limited license back to the author, so the author can, for instance, distribute a copy on his or her web page. So, can transfer to other services that do other kinds of things like that.
Y por lo tanto, la universidad podría poner una licencia de Creative Commons restringiendo usos comerciales, entiendo.
Yeah. So it's not a it's slightly different from a Creative Commons license. A Creative Commons license would be a transfer of this kind of non-exclusive license to the world, and here we're only transferring it to the university. By the way, I have to say, I'm not a lawyer, so what I'm telling you is my understanding, not the actual facts. But to the best of my understanding, it's not as broad as a Creative Commons license, in the sense that although the university has this license, it can refrain from using parts of it. Now, the fact that it can refrain from using parts of this broad license can be useful. For instance, we're now in the process of negotiating with, or talking to various publishers. What we'd like to do is set up an arrangement with publishers where faculty don't have to attach these addenda, and the publishers would still agree to allow the university to place the articles in the repository in the kind of way we would like. And the fact that we can refrain from using certain of these rights allows us to enter into negotiation with publishers to do that kind of thing. So it turns out to be very valuable to us. In practice, many of the benefits of the Creative Commons license hold for this kind of thing. We can do distribution. We can allow people to be able to data mine the articles, to use them in all kinds of ways. So you get much of the benefit, but legally it's not identical to Creative Commons license, as I understand it.
Thank you. I'm not a lawyer either.
Sí, Alicia.
Pues se lo iba a preguntar a Stuart también. No entiendo muy bien si Harvard está apoyando una licencia de acceso abierto que deposita el artículo en el repositorio. ¿Por qué tiene que pagar 1.000 euros para que ese artículo se deposite en una revista en acceso abierto?
Yeah. So there's two separate issues. The first issue is the Harvard repository, the institutional repository. And of course there's no charge to an author or to anyone else for placing an article in the institutional repository. And there's no charge to anyone accessing the articles in the repository. It does cost something to run an institutional repository. So the university has to fund the running of the institutional repository, but Harvard has decided that funding this kind of repository project is worth its while. The discussion about the 1,000 euros had to do with open access journals. An open access journal is very different. Access from an open access journal is a very different prospect from from access from an institutional repository. Institutional repositories do none of the, almost none of the services that a publisher provides when publishing a journal. Let me see if I can if you bear with me for a second. Publishers provide a whole range of services when they're publishing journals. They fall into roughly three categories. First is the logistics of the peer review process. They manage the peer review process, and it's the peer review process that leads to the filtering aspect that journals provide. And they provide that by rejecting articles. They don't publish absolutely anything that's submitted. They only publish the articles that match their standard of quality. And of course, quality standards differ between different journals, but whatever that standard of quality is, that's the filtering that they're doing. Because the journals vary in quality, the fact that an article was published in a certain journal gives that article an imprimatur of a journal, the brand name of the journal, and that gives a clue about the quality of the journal. Now, the publishers don't do the peer reviewing themselves. Of course, it's the scholars that do the peer reviewing, but they do some management of that process. And they provide the brand name that gives us the imprimatur. To a great extent, the benefit of publishing in a journal to a faculty member is that imprimatur. It's the fact that you get to say that you publish an article in such and such a journal. They also provide some production services, copy editing, typesetting, graphic design, layout, and so forth. And they also, of course, provide distribution. These days, distribution, especially through networks, digital distribution is extremely low cost, essentially zero marginal cost. In fact, of the services they provide, almost all of the services that publishers provide these days are costs that scale with the number of articles they publish and not with the amount of access they provide. They're so-called first copy costs. But those are not trivial costs. Those are not zero costs. And those are important services that have to be paid for. So we need a sustainable way to pay for those first copy costs. The natural way to do that is to find a way where the payment scales with the number of articles, not with the amount of access as well, because it matches better the services, and it also means that access doesn't have to be charged for. We don't have to charge subscription fees. And that method, the method that the business model that provides payment according to publication as opposed to access, is the open access journal that charges a fee for processing an article, a one-time fee to cover the costs of managing the peer review process, production, and what little distribution costs there are. So it makes sense that journals should charge for that. And they're providing services, and they're providing services to universities and funding agencies, and the universities and funding agencies ought to be willing to pay those charges. They would be paying those charges in an economic system that was a functional market, not a dysfunctional market like the subscription-based market, so you'd expect that the cost would be lower in general. But even if they were the same, even if we ended up paying the same amount now, amount for open access journal charges that we were paying now for the subscription fees, we would still be better off, because we'd be getting all the same services, and we'd have open access instead of the limited access that we now get through subscriptions. So that's what that €1,000 is going for. It's a one-time fee that ought to be paid for by the university, not the author, and it goes for these valuable services that the publishers provide, and we need to continue to have.
Sí, pero entonces déjame que te haga la pregunta al revés. Entonces, ¿para qué necesitamos los repositorios?
Well, that's a very good question. So you might think if we had open access journals, and if we could transition from a situation where the journals were subscription journals to a situation where they were open access journals. Why would we need repositories? And the answer is, we wouldn't. There would be no need for repositories. If the articles were available open access from the publishers, from the journals, then we wouldn't need this secondary, supplementary access means. In fact, repository access is not nearly as good as access from the publisher. In the repository, we end up with the author's final version of the article, not the publisher's version. It doesn't necessarily have all of the improvements that the publisher put into the article. So once we've moved to a world in which all journals are, or the bulk of journals are open access journals, the need for institutional repositories and subject-based repositories will be greatly reduced. However, we don't know if we'll ever move to such a situation. And then certainly until we do, institutional repositories are a good way of getting the access that the subscription-based system is providing less and less of.
Es que, respondiendo un poco también a Alicia, si leemos la iniciativa de Budapest, el objetivo es tener acceso abierto a los artículos, en el sentido de acceso abierto de utilizar libremente ese artículo, y los repositorios, el autoarchivo, es una estrategia para llegar allí. O sea que, un poco, es una herramienta que tenemos actualmente para cuando lleguemos allí. No, pero te estoy diciendo, ¿cuándo llegaremos ahí? Igual es una utopía. Pero bueno.
No, es que tampoco quiero seguir discutiendo el tema este.
No te lo estoy discutiendo, quiero decir que en la declaración de Budapest se hablaba del autoarchivo no como un fin, sino como una estrategia para llegar a otro fin.
Sí, bueno, se hablaba así de las dos vías y todo eso.
Sí, por esto que digo, que tendría sentido lo que dices, y quizás en un futuro van a desaparecer los repositorios.
No sé. Lo que me suena a mí todo esto es un mundo que decías tú, vivimos todavía en el mundo impreso y lo estamos emulando en el mundo digital. Y yo lo que entiendo es que tiene que llegar un día en que el artículo se independice de la revista y el artículo no tenga valor porque aparece en esa revista. Y tendríamos que empezar a pensar en nuevos sistemas de peer review, que Stuart lo ha dejado un poco sin desarrollar, porque lo que nos hace estar dependiendo de las revistas es eso.
Claro, lo que pasa es que los académicos, que son los que hacen el peer review, como ha dicho Stuart, quieren y siguen estando interesados en que ese es el método fundamental en cómo se evalúa la publicación científica. Nosotros ahí, realmente hasta que ellos no planteen otro modelo, nosotros no tenemos nada que decir al respecto.
¿Cómo que no?
Digo,
podemos ofrecerles un sistema.
Yo creo que los bibliotecarios no, Alicia, no sé.
Este es un problema clásico también de el sistema de evaluación de la investigación científica, de que actualmente se valora lo que dices tú. Es que esto
lo que digo yo es los repositorios y los repositorios como
pero lo que estoy diciendo es que actualmente se valora y la comunidad científica valora dónde publicas y no lo que publicas. O sea, se valora la revista y no el artículo. Por ejemplo, el que resolvió el teorema de Fermat decidió no publicarlo en ninguna revista y lo puso en el archive. Allí lo puso. Dijo, no voy a potenciar ninguna revista, porque aquel artículo estará citado miles de veces. Pues bueno, es una manera, pero hasta que no cambiemos el sistema de evaluación, y no sé si somos la gente que está en bibliotecas o quién, yo creo que es toda la universidad, lo tiene que cambiar, pero también a largo plazo.
I just might want to comment on one of the things, if I could follow the discussion completely. So just as a feedback on what Stuart is saying, that he argumented that if we enter a completely open access publishing scheme, that repositories would no longer have any use. Well, that only goes when you could say that all scientific content can be fitted into a journal article. Well, I disagree for a little bit, because articles, whether journal articles or conference proceedings, are actually finished products of research, while institutional repositories could be valuable sources for building blocks of those products. For example, you have data sets or some kinds of videos or graphs, and they will have still a place in an institutional repository even if all publishing is in open access. Well, I hope, because otherwise we will be out of business in some time.
No, because maybe the journals will need repositories to have the articles there.
Yes, maybe.
Can I just say, I certainly agree with that last comment, I was addressing the issue of institutional repositories for the purpose of distributing scholarly articles, but there are many other things, digital objects that can be distributed by repositories. So from that point of view, but I took the original question with respect to just scholarly articles.
Bueno, nos hemos pasado ya un poco del tiempo. Yo creo que el debate es muy interesante, pero claro, las traductoras también están cansadas. Entonces, Reme, la última palabra.
Casi que Stuart y Bram lo han dicho. Se está hablando todo el rato de artículos, pero hay otros materiales. Esta mañana había un taller del protocolo ORE, y hemos estado dando vueltas a los datasets. Ignasi ha hablado sobre el protocolo de Science Commons sobre datos, entonces creo que esta discusión está bien, pero no hay que restringir los artículos, con lo cual, en fin, volvemos otra vez a empezar. Alicia, la cuestión no es porque si son los repositorios, y Driver te da la respuesta, ¿por qué? Y si lo... Driver... No, cuando tú has dicho que cuando cuestionas resistencia de los repositorios a...
No.
Bueno, bien, ¿para qué van a existir los repositorios si hay revistas Open Access? Tú sabes que hay servicios sobre repositorios y lo sabes bien por los proyectos que hay, y entonces pues tiene otra utilidad aparte de solamente colocarlos.
Científica, ¿no? O sea que nosotros podemos ser muy idealistas y tener muchas buenas intenciones, pero ¿qué nos pasa? Que no nos están enviando contenidos a los repositorios. ¿Por qué no nos envían contenidos? Por todo esto que se está diciendo ahora, que es la realidad hoy por hoy, que es que los autores tienen que publicar en las revistas científicas, vaya, porque les evalúan por su promoción profesional, sus reconocimientos de tramos de investigación, etcétera, etcétera. Y eso es así y se me ha ido la idea.
Oye, siento dejar aquí el debate, pero nos tenemos que ir. Quiero dar las gracias a Stuart, muchísimas gracias Stuart, y a todos vosotros que estáis en la mesa. Ha sido muy interesante la sesión de esta tarde. Gracias y bueno, estaremos en contacto, Stuart.
Thank you.